580 KIDO, Kevin Miller in the morning. Our great friend Mike Baker joining us, formerly of the CIA, formerly of just about every cable news channel.
That sounds like I'm just out there, just as a mercenary, just marching around.
Well, we love your insights on what's going on in national politics and the intelligence community. And when you're not letting the national cable networks know what's going on, you run your own private company as well.
I do, yeah. Diligence for all your information and security needs. That's Diligence. It's been a really good ride. We've been doing that business ever since I got out of the outfit, and we've been very fortunate. Great investors and a really great staff. And I was talking about this, not to get into the weeds, but I was talking about this with one of my partners. And probably the thing we've enjoyed most about building a business, and maybe I assume it's the same way with just about everybody that's building a business of any size, it's the fact that we've been doing this for a few years now, and we've been able to watch people grow up, right? And they've had kids, and and our company's been responsible for, putting food on their table, and they've got houses, and so you feel like you're actually contributing something other than, building a business. You're actually, I don't know, I don't want to get all touchy-feely, but we had this conversation, and I thought, yeah, you know what, at the end of the day, that's what's really important is, to this. It's not, the fact that we're making money or whatever. I mean, obviously that's important, but it's just been nice watching people grow up in our company.
Well, let's talk about some of your other professions. You were on the Travel Channel. You're a multimedia guy when you're not consulting for a series on TBS or TNT or anything else. You're a multimedia guy, so any television series that you can report that you're starring in?
Well, we're doing, thank you very much for asking. I'm always happy to give another shameless plug. We are in the middle of discussions with Discovery on a new show that is tentatively called Black Files, which is all about secret budgets within the U.S. government that fund fascinating operations, mostly spec ops operations and others. And to the degree that we can talk about them, obviously a lot of it is classified. It's looking at these programs, these operations, some in the past that have ended, a lot of them current, and some, designed for the future that, never see the light of day. So we're looking to get this thing rolling on Discovery. And then working on a couple of drama series, one in the UK and one here in the States. So it's, besides the day job, which always keeps us busy, the TV and film side of things has always been entertaining. And it's a nice way, it's a stress reliever, basically. It's a nice way to step away from the sort of the things that we do regularly in intelligence and security work and, get a little break.
Right, because you don't work enough as it is.
That's right. That's what Emily says. My incredible wife. She and she's building her own business. She's building a public policy and communications firm, and is clearly the smartest one in our family.
You guys ever vacation? I mean, it's all like work.
No, we got little kids, and so we'll vacation when we retire. I guess everybody says that, right?
Sure.
then you walk outside and get hit by a bus. Oh, I should have vacationed. Anyway, but yeah, it's been good. It's been a very good ride. I think you always have to remember, I tell my kids this all the time. I said, just work hard, and don't take anything for granted, and work a little harder. They're all in sports now. They're young enough. They're young, but they're old enough now to be in team sports now and rising up through lacrosse and basketball and other things. And we tell them all the time, just work a little bit harder than the person next to you, and you'll do so much better. Just beat the average. And it's true. It's always worked for us, and that's it. Thank you, Dr. Phil. You're welcome.
All right, Dr. Miller over here with Mike Baker, Idaho Insights, on your Town Square Media station. Now, you could have lived anywhere in the country, and we're going to throw you off a little because before we get to the usual red meat, the Russians, the Iranians, the Trumps.
Yeah.
What do you make of the growth in the Treasure Valley since you've been here? A lot of people moving in.
A lot of people moving in. We got here about 5 years ago, and it was before all the cranes showed up downtown, and they started building all the hotels and Jump and all the rest of it. And I've been amazed. I understand it 100% because we've been ecstatic to be here, and I'm never leaving. I've lived all over this globe, and I have no intention of ever leaving the Treasure Valley. So I understand why there's such an influx of people. But I guess you get that attitude, right? You've been here, for a little bit of while, again, only a few years, but my wife is originally from here. And you start feeling like, well, I wish all these people wouldn't be moving here. And you start doing that thing with, all these folks, all these cranes, all this construction. And then I realized, well, of course they're moving here. Why wouldn't they? You get a lot of folks coming in from California and elsewhere, and I'm guilty of it myself. People will be upset to learn that when I'm traveling or I'm on TV, I'm always talking up Idaho. So
right.
I'm probably responsible for at least 100 or 200 people that have moved here over the past couple of years.
That's at MB Company Man on Twitter.
That's the one.
Yes.
Yeah.
All your complaints about people moving to Idaho.
Send them to MB Company Man on Twitter. Yeah, and I'll field those complaints immediately.
Mike Baker, let's talk about President Trump. Just your overall review as someone who has worked in operations, represented our country in operations in places that we'll never know about. How would you grade the president, sir?
Well, on his ability to upset the apple cart and to create change and consternation amongst the progressives and the far left and the resistance movement, I'd give him an A+, because I find that part of it hugely entertaining. And in terms of other aspects, and now here again, I'm going to do this with a caveat. I didn't vote for him. I didn't vote for Clinton. Neither, I at the time didn't get behind either. But now that President Trump is in the office, what I want is for this place to work. I want it to work, and I want them to be successful. So, while I think you've got certain camps of people. The person that says, well, I didn't vote for him, and I want the whole thing to fall apart. I want him to be impeached, and I want this place to, go down in flames, and then we'll start over. I'm thinking, why would you want that? No matter who's in that office, I want the government to work. I want the administration to be successful. I want the country to be successful. So that's where it goes. I think from the economic point of view, I think he's done well. I think the deregulation, I think, has been excellent. Slicing and dicing through the massive amounts of regulation that were put in place over the past 8 years, and just absolutely slowing things down. And I say that as a business owner with business operations here in the U.S. And so I think that part of it's very good. I would like to see less tweeting, but everybody would. That's not going to happen, so we can move on. I think the foreign policy side of things, honestly, we would not be having a discussion about sitting down with North Korea and the possibility, even though it may be remote, but the possibility of denuclearizing the peninsula. We wouldn't have that conversation if Hillary Clinton had gotten in office. We would have had the same policy towards North Korea that we've had for 30-plus years that has been useless and feckless, and some other words that begin with less. So, so I think that was a positive. I think dealing with China has been interesting and possibly very productive in the long run, even though there's some short-term concerns about the possibility of a trade war. I don't think we're going in that direction. So there's certain aspects of the foreign policy that I think have worked out very well. And are we more divisive now? Well, sure. The resistance and the never-Trumpers and the progressives, of course, they're more hardcore and got their heels dug in deeper than they did before, but that's to be expected. As a nation, are we more divided? I don't know. We were pretty darn divided over the past 8 years, and I just did say darn. I was very mindful of that, see?
This is Idaho Insights, and we appreciate that.
I didn't know whether you had a dump button or not, so okay.
This is a public affairs show, Mr. Baker.
I will keep that in mind.
Yes. Before we get to North Korea, the thought of the deep state, the intelligence community, Mr. McCabe getting the boot, this is an area that is your backyard. You'll tell us the truth as opposed to what we hear in the media. So what's going on? Is there a deep state, and do you buy that segments of the intelligence community were working against this administration?
Well, I will buy that there were individuals in positions of real responsibility who I believe allowed their partisanship or their political beliefs. And everybody's got an opinion, right? Everybody's got a political belief. You're not going to get to a place where that's not the case. So, fine. But I believe they allowed those beliefs to influence their work decisions, and that within law enforcement or the intel community is not right. So whether we're talking about Peter Strzok or Andy McCabe, Jim Comey, John Brennan, you had some very political animals who had risen up to extremely important positions within these organizations that must be seen as apolitical for them to be effective and credible with the entire American public. And they, I think, forgot that. And you can't, it's fine. Again, have your own personal beliefs. But those organizations, the FBI, the CIA, and others within the overall law enforcement intel community have got to be apolitical. To the degree possible, you're always going to get a political appointee coming into one of these positions, right? So the agency director, although now we've got a new appointee, she's got to get confirmed, but she's risen up through the ranks. That's what you want, as far as I'm concerned, with the CIA. We've been talking about that for years. You know, how come we can't get a director who comes up through operations and takes over that spot? And now we're close to having that person, and so hopefully she'll get confirmed.
John McCain isn't a fan, but let me follow up,
right,
as we only can do that on Idaho Insights, the hard-hitting show in the Treasure Valley. When we take a look at, when you were working for the CIA, again, maybe this is naive. I always thought it was like the military. You kept your politics personal, and we're seeing these declassified memos where it was Peter Strzok and Lisa Page texting back and forth, and you think to yourself, what were they thinking? As you know, sir, not everybody, and you'll disagree, but not everybody can work for the CIA. Very high standards. Not everybody can work for the FBI. Incredible high standards. And then you have these folks doing it, and I'm going, again, what were they thinking? Or is that common that you kind of shoot the breeze with the cell phones? It
wasn't common at least in my experience, and that's all we can talk about is what our own personal experience is. But sitting around safe houses overseas or getting ready for some activity or another, I never remember looking at my colleagues, the folks in my group, and saying, hey, and then getting into a political conversation. It didn't happen. Right? We didn't do that. The only time, I will say this much, the only time I remember, and this is the honest to God's truth, the only time I remember having talked about anything politically was I was standing in front of a TV in one of our overseas stations, standing next to one of the senior guys there in the station, and we were watching Bill Clinton on TV. He was giving that speech where he said he did not have relations with that woman. And I remember we were watching that, and really only watching it because we happened to be walking by and it was on. And I remember we stopped, and he said that. He made that comment, and I looked at the guy I was with, and I said, you know what? If he's lying, he's done. Because he's just said that on national TV. And in my mind, I thought, you can't possibly lie, right? On national TV to the American public and get away with that. And I was naive, right? I was naive. But that shows, how naive I was, I guess, about politics. Sure enough, he got away with it. But that was the only time I can honestly remember talking about anything related to politics. Now, again, everybody has their own political opinion. But I couldn't have told you. I could have lined up 100 of my colleagues, and I wouldn't have been able to identify what political party they were with or associated with. So what we saw with Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and kind of the behavior that we saw is, I think, is abnormal. And it needs to be dealt with because, again, we're talking about the credibility of these organizations. And if that's – I don't know how else to go with it,
More coming up with Mike Baker next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And Kevin Miller in the morning here on KIDO Talk Radio. Our phone number is 208-580-5436, 208-580-KIDO. Our great friend Mike Baker joining us. Talk a little intelligence and politics and such. As a fan of our intelligence operations, and again, from my limited point of view, the ethics and the morals and everything, you are held to an incredibly high standard that I don't think the media really understands as well when they're looking at, the reporting. I mean, you just can't do things that you can't post what you're doing on Facebook.
Right. And you're also supposed to be smart enough to know that, if you're Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and you're working for the FBI and you're sending these texts back and forth, at some point you should stop and have thought, well, I wonder if we should be texting all this.
Right.
Maybe I should just pick up the phone and call her, or maybe I should just mention it to her while we're having coffee. So that part of it seemed a little odd as well. But, you look at a fellow like John Brennan. John Brennan just sent out a tweet, right? And, that tweet, it shows, right? It shows. I would rather see a former director of the agency ride off into the sunset, and do good elsewhere, maybe quietly, maybe eventually come back into government, take another position. But the days when people in those positions would leave and then, sort of live a life of quiet refinement are gone. Maybe because of social media and technology. But it's inappropriate, I think. And John Brennan was always a political animal. That's kind of in part how you rise up. He was an analyst in the agency. You rise up through there by knowing how to play the game and being political. He was very close to President Obama. And I don't know. I think we had this problem. Hopefully it's going to clear itself out. I think it will. I've got a great amount of faith in the FBI and obviously in my old outfit as well. But with the FBI, I know a lot of the agents. They're terrific people. And I think a lot of them are also looking around thinking, what's with all the noise? Can we just get back to doing what we do best? So
I promised to get to North Korea and to Russia, but these recent bombings in Austin, Texas, we've learned this week that over 350 additional FBI agents are going on the scene. It harkens back to the days of the Unabomber. Mm-hmm. What do you make of that? And obviously a lot of boots on the ground will help. You would think in the society that we live in today, it would be impossible to have these packages with tripwires injuring people.
Well, no, because, you dumb things down, right? And you make it, you go back to the basics. And it sounds weird, but when I'm talking about sort of the explosive devices and the way that they're put together. And so that part of it, you need just a certain level of knowledge and some resource. It's a frightening world out there nowadays, right? If you looked at this, you go back to the Unabomber day, right? And that amount of information wasn't necessarily out there, right, in public space, open source. Now it is. You search the internet and you can find all sorts of information, unfortunately. So that widens the playing field in terms of, well, who could have had this knowledge? Who could have had this ability? But I think, as with all these cases, the Unabomber, honestly, until he released that manifesto, they weren't going to catch him. And so, everybody's hoping that there will be something, usually some forensic evidence from the explosive devices themselves, which is how it normally works. Something is picked up from the scene, and you have some ability to trace that component or that piece or that part that there's just a little shred of it left, but it's got a serial number that hasn't been burnt off. So there's something there that you can then use to start to piece it together, figure out where something was purchased. Then you start going through, and it's a very labor-intensive investigative process. But again, great deal of faith and effort or belief from the FBI, the ATF, and the others that are involved in this. So they will catch the perpetrator, whoever it is. And just all we can do is hope that nobody else gets hurt, but that they can do this quickly. The reality is sometimes it doesn't happen quickly, as we know with the Unabomber. So it's not like TV. Nobody should expect this to be like a police show on TV.
Like Mike Baker on the Travel Channel, where he goes all over the place.
Exactly. It's not like
escapes
that.
From Alcatraz. Yeah. I still remember that episode.
that was great. We had a tremendous amount of time or fun doing that. And I'm working with the same production team on this new, hopefully this new show with Discovery. Same group of guys. Great bunch of people.
Mike Baker joining us. I could go on and on, but again, you go back to recreating what happened with JFK, and my favorite Mike Baker story is that, hey, did we get clearance for this? Oh, don't worry about it. You've got the weapon out in the middle of the grassy knoll and all this, and you're in the middle of Texas.
You're surrounded by Texans out on Dealey Plaza, and the production team says, it'll be fine. Just fire off a few shots. And I'm sure nobody here in this entire area in Texas is carrying a concealed weapon and will decide to fight back. But it was great. Luckily, the Dallas police were terrific, and that worked out very well. But yeah, it's been a good ride. But it's a crazy world. I know you mentioned North Korea.
Well, I'm glad you're finally getting to it, because I'm unfortunately not. So you're going to have to get us to North Korea, sir.
I think the top line news item on that is that we may be sitting down with him, President Trump, Kim Jong-un, and of course a host of other people. It's not going to be like the two of them get together by themselves, for a beer. There'll be a host of other people, and there'll be a lot of discussion that goes to set the table for this discussion. But I think that's the most fascinating part of all of this. It was only 3 months ago when the far left was, berating President Trump, saying he's going to get us into a nuclear war. And you know what? The opposite might be true. And I think that's the shakeup of the infrastructure that I find so interesting and entertaining, is that whether it's North Korea and the fact that now you've got the far left scratching their heads thinking, what? They might have a conversation. They might, they'll talk about it, possibly. And again, there's is there a good chance? Maybe not, but it's worth doing. It's just like with DACA. What? They've offered 1.8 million people, and then they get confused because, the far left doesn't know what to do. And so then they decide to dig their heels in and fight it. And then you've got a lot of, DACA folks out there thinking, what are the Democrats doing? This looked like a decent deal. And so whether it's that or North Korea or anything else where he's upended this thing, right? And he's changed the way that things work in Washington. And I think that is absolutely fast.
And Kevin Miller in the morning here on KIDO Talk Radio. Our phone number is 208-580-5436, 208-580-KIDO. Our great friend Mike Baker joining us. Talk a little intelligence and politics and such. You go back to North Korea, put on your intelligence hat. What do we really know about them? This is a complete blank slate. You can't see what Kim Jong-un's doing on the Facebook or the Twitter. I mean, this is something that I think you'll find fascinating. The guy that knows both these folks is Dennis Rodman.
Yeah. I think he's going to be there in the room with them. I would hope. That would be the best part of the whole thing. No, I think it's... Honestly, we have to be pragmatic about this, right? If these conversations, if this talk does go through, we have to be pragmatic about what it means and the ability for us to actually verify what is happening with North Korea's nuclear program. And that's where it's all going to hinge, right? Because it's one thing to say, yes, they're going to do it and put that in place. But as we know from Iran and as we know from past North Korean discussions, unless you can actually verify 100%, they're going to find a way around it. And that was, old John Kerry, remember, when he was Secretary of State, and they were pushing that ridiculous Iranian deal. And he said, no, this is great. It's all based on verification. Well, what he didn't finish his sentence with, but what a lot of people in the intel community knew, was that we don't have 100% verification in Iran. We're nowhere near close to that. They didn't even allow us into a couple of their key sites as part of this. But they were so keen to get a deal to say, look what we've done, that they overlooked that. They didn't bother with it. So we haven't had verification to the degree that we've needed it in Iran. And that's what makes that whole deal useless. And it's what allowed them to continue marching forward. It's allowed the North Koreans over the years to continue marching forward. So we have to figure out a way to have 100% verification of what's happening on the ground.
Is that really possible based on your experience?
Well, you never know. I mean, is it likely? Maybe not. But is it something we should insist on before we take our foot off the gas with sanctions, or lighten up on the pressure? Yes, we should absolutely insist on it. We should go back with Iran and say, I'm sorry, you didn't let us into Parchin or some of the other sites. We're going to need to go into those now. Otherwise, we're happy to tear up the deal because they're spinning centrifuges anyway. Whether we want to believe it or not.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's the key part of this with North Korea. But you know what? A channel of diplomacy, a channel of conversation is always a good thing. And we don't know because we've adjusted the dynamics of how things are working right now. It would be naive, willfully ignorant, or just obstructionist for anybody to say, no, don't have these conversations. Let's see what happens with it.
Mike Baker joining us, intelligence analyst, expert, media, multi-platform personality on Idaho Insights with Kevin Miller. How about Russia? We hear a lot about Russia. Putin was just reelected.
That was a shocker.
Yeah, 73% of the vote.
Who saw that coming?
You've gone toe-to-toe with these guys when they were the real Russians with the Soviet Union. Obviously, is Putin getting the band back together again?
Yeah, you know what? They've never changed. The funny thing about this is they have always been the same, the Russians, I mean. Whether it was the Soviet Union or whether, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they have never changed their mindset. So Putin never came out of the end of the Cold War and thought to himself, well, maybe we'll get a peace dividend, and this will be great, and we're going to start working with countries, and it'll be a community of nations. No, it's always been the Cold War from their perspective. We're the ones here in the U.S. and with our allies that we thought somehow we were going to get a peace dividend. There was talk after the end of the Cold War that somehow we could actually close down the CIA. We didn't need the CIA. Serious people in Washington were talking about that. And so we have misplayed and misjudged Russia's agenda for a long time, not just the previous administration, but the Bush administration, everybody really, for quite some time. So, I think he has been in some effort, in some way, trying to cobble together, not physically necessarily, although he's done it with Crimea, he's done it with eastern Ukraine, he's done it with Georgia, parts of Georgia, south of Ossetia and Abkhazia, cobbling together the old Soviet Union, sometimes through just policy strength, through energy policy, as an example, having influence over the European continent. That's been his aim. He's considered the collapse of the Soviet Union to be an enormous catastrophe, and he's said as much. So that's his mindset. Did they meddle in our elections? Of course they did. And did they meddle in elections before? Yes. Have they meddled in elections all over the globe? Yes. Have they done it since 1940 when they meddled over here in the U.S. trying to keep us out of the war, when they were still aligned with the Nazis? Yeah, absolutely. We know that for a fact. They were paying journalists. They were setting up trade unions and supposedly independent associations to influence thought and opinion. They were doing all sorts of things here, spending resources and spying to try to keep us out of the war. They've been doing it for decades and decades. So we should not be surprised that they were meddling in our elections, the most recent ones. And will they do it again in the future? Of course they will. That's what they do. So I'm surprised at the surprise that people in Washington and on Capitol Hill have at this. They should know better.
Indeed, of course, historically, as you've pointed out, that's what they've done for years, whether it was the Soviet Union, the Warsaw Pact, or what have you. But how do you see the Trump-Putin relationship more clearly than, let's say, the national media?
Yeah, I think it's funny that, people in the resistance movement against Trump or the hard left or the progressives, whatever you want to call it, that somehow they keep clinging to this dream of collusion, that somehow he's a Putin puppet. And yet look, we've been selling arms now to groups in the Ukraine who are trying to fight back against the Russian aggression. We have been taking a hard line in Syria against the Russian position there, which is completely aligned with the Iranian position in Syria. We have been increasing sanctions against Russia. These are not the sort of things that you do. These aren't the sort of things that President Obama did when they were, delightfully squealing about doing a reset with the Russians. So I think if people would set aside their politics and just look at the realities on the ground, then maybe they would come up with a little bit of a different interpretation as to what the current policies are of the administration. But they can't get past the hatred. I understand that they're very emotive. They're still upset and raging about the fact that they lost. They still believe that everything that the president does is the death of the republic. But set some of that aside, if possible. Take a deep breath and actually analyze what's going on, and then make your decisions. But this going to bed every night and then waking up hoping that the president will be impeached is not particularly productive. You don't like him, fine. Of course not. I have a lot of people that don't, a lot of people that do. And by the way, quit calling the people that support the president stupid, because that's not getting you anywhere.
Isn't that strange, though? People at the highest levels of government, intelligence, they can't get past it. And one could argue that, most people got past President Obama getting elected that didn't agree with President Obama. They just took one for the team. But, sooner or later, you have to act like an adult.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing. Conservatives, Republicans in general, they don't protest well. They don't march, right? They don't organize big, marches to go out. I mean, there's the pro-life march, but other than that, there's really not a lot of big marching going on. There's not a lot of, painting of signs and, hashtags on Twitter that conservatives do as a group. They tend to just, say, oh, okay, I don't like it, but, yeah, okay, I got to get the kids off to school and get up and go to work, So, I'm not saying, don't protest. Protest is a great thing. Do it peacefully. But at a certain point, again, do the things that make sense. Hey, you want to get involved in your local politics? Great. Go about doing things the way you're supposed to do. But, this idea that, again, of course Russia was meddling, but have we seen any signs of collusion? Maybe somebody can send me some examples of evidence-based fact saying that there was collusion. I haven't seen any. And so far, we haven't heard anything from Robert Mueller. The Senate report came out and said they didn't find any.
Mueller hasn't contacted you.
No, he hasn't contacted me. I may be the last person he calls. I mean, he's talking to everybody else. Maybe he'll, get around to us out here in Boise soon. But I just think it's counterproductive. Work the system. You don't like it, work the system. Get local folks elected in your state houses. Get people on the slate for Congress. Do those things, but don't just stand there and throw hand grenades at the administration while they are legitimately trying to do some things to move this country forward.
Mike Baker, we appreciate you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
This is a question that's been included in every census since 1965, with the exception of 2010, when it was removed.
By including a citizenship question, which will diminish response rates, the census will not be able to fulfill its constitutional duty to count everyone.
The Commerce Department says the citizenship data will help the Justice Department enforce the Voting Rights Act. Democrats argue the question could discourage some immigrants from filling out the questionnaire, resulting in inaccurate population counts that could affect how minorities are represented in Congress.
We've contained this question that's provided data that's necessary for the Department of Justice to protect voters, and specifically to help us better comply with the Voting Rights Act.
Given the way that this administration has attacked immigrants, you can understand why immigrant families would be afraid to fill out the census questionnaire.
And there we have it. Good morning, Kevin Miller in the morning here at KIDO Talk Radio. So, the big news yesterday, the state of California. The state of California reminds me of people at work. Sooner or later we all have to grow up. We gripe, we do this, we do that, and eventually you say to somebody, whether you're part of a team, whether you're part of an organization, whether you're part of a church, do you want to be here? Do you want to be here? Because if you want to be here, these are the rules, and this is how it happens. This is how it goes down. So the state of California has a problem with people saying in the census, are you a citizen? Now, this comes back to the fundamental backbone of our entire country. The census is not here to count occupants. The census is not here to count residents. The census is not here to count the illegals. The census is here to count citizens of this country. Now, people can talk about, congressional districts and everything else. If there are illegal aliens that are being counted as normal citizens, to increase, how should we put this? To increase a congressional district, then those need to be recovered. Those need to be rooted out. Those need to be taken down. Because what we've forgotten in the post-Obama era, in the Stormy Daniels, let's get Donald Trump, and no matter what we have to do to tear him down and his family down, is forget about the rule of law. No, we forgot about that with Bill Clinton. And then we had wishy-washy George W. Bush. And the Bush administration was good to me, so I shouldn't complain. However, George Bush kind of gypped evangelicals, gypped people of faith. He was an establishment guy. Got rid of a lot of good-hearted conservatives. Didn't fight for conservatism. At 580-5436, 580-KF. But can you believe the state of California has an issue with this? And then you have people defending this and saying, something, it hasn't been asked for years. No, it has. As Sarah Sanders said, you can't count people that are not here legally. Non-citizens should not have the right to vote. They're not going to answer honestly. Well, okay, but we're not going to enable the lawbreakers. We want an accurate count of the census. And yet you have people in California that are fighting mad. They're so mad, they're getting ready to go to court.
When the clock was about to expire, it seems that the Trump administration made a decision and announced it would add this question about citizenship to the 2020 census.
What's wrong with that? And by the way, do you notice everything has to be about race? Everything has to, when we don't have an argument, the person that is trying to enforce the law is a racist. You know, and my dad used to say this to me all the time. He still does. No, not, Kevin, if you had a brain, you'd be dangerous. But he would say to me, well, I had a good run. I had a great life. I lived for the most of my life in a great country. And now, as I look at the kids and the grandkids that are going to inherit the United States of America, I look to myself and I go, I'm saying the same thing as my dad. Traffic and weather together at KIDO.
Given the way that this administration has attacked immigrants, you can understand why immigrant families would be afraid to fill out the census questionnaire.
Wow. Well, if you're here, what do you mean? They shouldn't be filling it out anyway, right? If you're not here legally. But the state of California is saying that the administration is scaring people by saying, are you a citizen?
The Trump administration has yet again failed to learn from history. They failed to consider the consequences of scaring people into not filling out the census forms.
Right. Of course, the illegals and the non-citizens probably didn't fill it out anyway. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Does California really want to be part of the nation? C3PO, good morning and welcome to KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, C3PO, because definition of terms, first of all.
Hello? Well, must have been some problems there with the Millennium Falcon. We appreciate you joining us there, C3PO. But at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. I know what you're saying, Kevin. We have this big shootout in Nampa. Doug will have the latest coming up on that. By the way, thanks to the cops and the police officers in the Nampa Police Department and the Canyon County Police Department. Thank you for your service. As we have more folks coming in, some disturbed, some lawbreakers, a lot of them good people, we're starting to see more of these real crime, real-life stories. And it certainly can't be easy to be involved in a shootout. So, again, thank you to our brave men and women and their families and law enforcement, not only in Canyon County and the Napa Police Department that had that issue last night, but, of course, throughout the Treasure Valley. We certainly support you and do the very best we can to let you know how much we appreciate you and love you. But can anybody really love what's going on in California? I go back to this thing is, again, to me, they're like that employee that just wants to leave. They can't quit. They don't want to quit, but they just want to be fired. And I don't know if you can fire someone from the union. And then, as Sean Hannity has been reporting, there are, and we've kind of touched on this, there are good people in California that say, look, we don't want any part of this nonsense. We don't want any part of the insanity, right? They don't want to be a sanctuary city. They don't want to be a sanctuary state. And what do you do for the good people? Our friend Melanie Morgan, when we have her on, they're a dying breed. Conservatives in California, they're all coming to Idaho. Let's hope they're conservative. Anyway, trust but verify, as President Reagan said. Hey, we're having fun this morning, starting your day on the right side. Kevin Miller on your home for Fox News on the radio right here in the Treasure Valley, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning.